My parents always said, "You're not the favorite. Deal with it." So I did, but now they're panicking after I cut off my financial support. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I really need your help. Our channel has been losing a bit of traction lately, and subscribing is honestly one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, it's free, and it makes a huge difference in keeping us going. Your support really means the world to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank you so much. Now, let's get into it. Subreddit. I've been debating whether or not to share this story for a while. Fair warning, it's long, but I promise it's worth it. This one has been sitting heavy with me, and I never planned to put it out there publicly. But after everything that's happened, yeah, I think it's time, so let's just say my family had secrets. A lot of them. And when my grandfather passed away, those secrets didn't just come out. They exploded. My whole life, I was treated like the backup plan, the spare. Then the will flipped everything upside down. Here's how it all went down. I'm 25 May, and for the longest time, I thought every kid grew up feeling like a side character in their own house. Turns out most parents at least pretend to love their kids equally. Mine? They didn't even bother pretending. From the very start, it was crystal clear. I was Plan B. The afterthought. The one they had because they already had their golden child. That golden child was Zach, my older brother, 27M. He had the spotlight locked down before I could even walk. In my parents' eyes, he could do no wrong. Anything he did, he was brilliant, unique, special. He flunked 2 classes in high school. My parents blamed the teachers. Meanwhile, I once got a B in math and suddenly I was lazy, got grounded for a week with no internet. Make it make sense. That was basically my entire childhood. And it wasn't just yelling or punishments. It was calculated neglect. When I was 9, I broke my arm falling off my bike. My mom? She was annoyed that she had to leave work early. She actually made me wait in the ER alone for 3 hours because she had to take Zach to basketball practice first. The nurse kept asking me where my parents were. I just stared at the floor, too embarrassed to answer. My dad was worse, but in a different way. He'd make little comments that cut deep. Why can't you be more useful like your brother? Or, Zach never gives us this much trouble. Once, when I won an academic award at school, my dad said, "Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes." Then he laughed like it was the funniest thing ever. My teacher overheard. She looked horrified. Me? I just nodded and took it, like always. Another time, I made the honor roll 3 quarters in a row. I brought the certificate home, excited, hoping maybe this time they'd care. My dad looked at it and said, "Huh? Guess they're letting everyone on these days." Then asked if Zach was home from soccer yet. That's the kind of stuff I grew up with. They had this scoreboard in their heads. Zach breathes? 10 points. I accomplished something big? Maybe half a point if they were feeling generous. One time I fixed our washing machine by watching YouTube tutorials. Saved them about $200 in repair costs. My dad's response? Make sure you put everything back where you found it. Not even a thank you. It was the everyday stuff that got to me. The way they'd cut me off mid-sentence but hang on to Zach's every word. The way they remembered every detail about his friends but couldn't name a single one of mine. How the fridge was always stocked with Zach's favorite snacks but never mine. It wasn't physical abuse or anything obvious. Nothing I could point at and say, "That's messed up." It was death by 1,000 cuts. The constant message that I mattered less, that I was less important, less valuable, less worthy of their time. So I stopped asking for things. Needed new shoes because mine had holes. I saved my own money. Wanted to join a school club. Figured out my own transportation. And when they gave me Zach's old hand-me-downs that didn't even fit, I was called ungrateful if I didn't thank them. Zach? He knew the system and played it perfectly. He'd screw up, blame it on me, and they'd always back him. No questions asked. Once I got banned from the family computer for breaking it. Reality? Zach downloaded a bunch of sketchy games that crashed the hard drive. Later he laughed and said, "They always believed me." And he wasn't wrong. Another time I was doing homework in the living room. Zach wanted to watch TV. Within minutes, my mom told me to go study in your room because I was distracting him. That wasn't a one-off. That was just Tuesday. When I got my driver's license, I had to borrow a neighbor's car for the test because my parents wouldn't let me use theirs. Said I might crash it. 2 weeks later, Zach dented their SUV backing into a pole. My dad laughed it off. A learning experience. When I pointed out the double standard, My mom sent me to my room for being divisive. Classic. The thing is, I wasn't asking for special treatment. Just basic parental interest. When I made the soccer team, my dad showed up to 0 games. Meanwhile, he never missed a single one of Zach's football games. Not one. I quit after a season. What was the point? So I faded into the background. Stopped making waves. Stopped asking. Just existed. I had a few friends, but I never brought them home. It was too embarrassing. By high school, I was working part-time just to stay away from home. Saved every penny. I had a calendar in my room where I marked down the days until graduation. Not because I was excited about the future, but because it meant I could finally get the hell out. The weirdest part? At the time, it all felt normal. Like, this is just life. Took me years to realize this wasn't how families were supposed to work. The only person who ever really cared about me was my grandfather, Walter. He wasn't the warm, huggy type. He didn't do heart-to-hearts. But he noticed things. Really noticed. He paid attention in a way no one else did. When I was 13, I was trying to fix my bike with the wrong tools. Out of nowhere, Grandpa showed up with an old toolbox. Thought you might need these, he said. No lecture, no guilt. Just help. Freshman year, the school had a science museum trip that cost $120. My parents said no because they'd already spent the activities budget on Zach's football camp. I didn't argue, just told my teacher I couldn't go. Somehow Grandpa found out. He slipped me an envelope with $120. For school, was all he said. Didn't tell my parents. Didn't make me feel like I owed him. At 14, I got into photography. My parents mocked me, called it a waste of time. Grandpa, he showed up with a real camera. Not brand new, but clearly something he'd just bought. He taught me how to use it. One winter night after a school event, my parents forgot to pick me up. It was pouring rain. I called home 3 times, no answer. Finally, I called Grandpa. He drove 40 minutes to get me. No complaints. Just handed me a towel, turned up the heat, and asked if I was hungry. We stopped for burgers. He never mentioned it to my parents. One Thanksgiving, everyone was saying what they were thankful for. My dad thanked Zach's bright future. My mom thanked my dad's promotion. Zach said something about his football scholarship. Me? I just muttered something generic about family. Grandpa went last. He looked right at me and said, I'm thankful for Noah's help fixing my deck. Couldn't have done it without him. That was the first time anyone had acknowledged me at a family gathering in years. He never badmouthed my parents. Never said they're wrong for treating you this way. He just quietly gave me what they never did, so I kept my head down. Worked through high school, got decent grades. Paid my own way into college. My parents didn't help. They didn't even come to orientation. My mom sent a one-line good luck text the morning I moved out. My dad, too busy on a phone call to say goodbye. No surprise there. Grandpa, though, he was the one who helped me move into my dorm. Drove me 3 hours, carried boxes up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope with $500. Emergency fund, he said. Don't tell your parents. Even after I left, nothing changed with my parents. Calls on birthdays, maybe a generic text. I was still the extra. The afterthought, until the day everything flipped. Grandpa died a year ago. Quiet funeral. No speeches. Just a handful of relatives and a priest. My parents managed to make even that about Zach, talking about how hard the loss was on him. Zach, who barely visited Grandpa twice a year. I thought that was it. But a week later, I got a call from the lawyer handling the estate. He wanted me to come in for the will reading. I figured Grandpa maybe left me his old tools, some books, stuff like that. Nothing major. But when I walked into the lawyer's office, my parents and Zach were already sitting there. My mom had her fake tight-lipped smile. My dad didn't even look at me. Zach was scrolling through his phone looking bored. The lawyer didn't waste time. He shuffled papers, adjusted his glasses, read through some legal jargon. Then, he got to the part that changed everything. To my grandson, Noah James Carter, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to my primary residence at 1420 Oakwood Drive, all bank accounts and investments, my vehicle, and all personal possessions contained within my home. That was it. Everything. The whole estate. Not split. Not shared. Just me. The room went dead silent. I think we were all still trying to process what had just happened. My mom was squinting, like she was checking to see if this was some elaborate joke. My dad sat there frozen. Zach finally looked up from his phone and asked the lawyer to repeat what he'd just said. "This can't be right," my mom said at last. "There must be some mistake." The lawyer shook his head. "No mistake. The will was updated 6 months ago. Mr. Carter was very clear about his wishes." 6 months ago? My mom repeated. "Who advised him to make these changes?" The lawyer glanced at his notes. "No one advised him, Mr. Carter. He requested the meeting himself and was very clear about his intentions." "He was old," my mom insisted. "He wasn't thinking clearly." "On the contrary," the lawyer replied. "He was completely sound of mind. I've worked with him for 20 years. He knew what he was doing," Zach spoke up. This isn't something Grandpa would do." The lawyer slid a document across the table. His signature was witnessed by myself and my associate. A video recording of the signing is available if needed. Zach looked at me like I'd somehow engineered the whole thing, like I'd pulled strings behind everyone's back. Truth was, I was just as shocked as they were. The meeting wrapped up pretty quickly after that. The lawyer handed me a folder with all the paperwork, the deed to the house, account information, keys, everything. My parents didn't say a word as we left the office. That silence felt heavier than any argument would have. It lasted until we reached the parking lot. Then my dad turned to me. "You know what the right thing to do is," he said. He didn't phrase it as a question, like there was only one acceptable interpretation of what had happened. He kept going. "The fair thing would be to split it. Zach's the older brother. He was closer to your grandfather. Complete nonsense. I was the one who brought Grandpa groceries every week when my parents forgot. I was the one who took him to the doctor after his fall 2 years ago. I fixed things around his house when they broke. Zach showed up on holidays, usually when there was food or presents involved. We'll discuss this at home," my mom added, giving me the same look that used to scare me as a kid, one that meant, "This is a family matter." I nodded without committing to anything. We all drove home separately. I needed time to think. Walking into my apartment that night, I kept replaying it over and over. Why would Grandpa do this? Why leave everything to me and nothing to anyone else? We got along, sure, but this felt extreme. This was the kind of thing that tears families apart. Then again, our family wasn't exactly close-knit to begin with. That night, I went through the paperwork. The house was worth around $350,000. Not a mansion, but a solid 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Savings and investments totaled about $200,000. The car was a well-maintained 2015 Toyota. Altogether, it was far more than I expected to have at 27. The next morning, the text started. "Noah, we need to talk about yesterday. Call me ASAP. Zach, WTF, man." I ignored them. I needed more time. It was Saturday, so I drove to Grandpa's house, my house now, I guess. Weird to think that. Everything was exactly as I remembered from my last visit 2 weeks before he died. Same furniture, same photos on the wall, same coffee mug still on the kitchen counter. I walked through each room slowly, seeing it with new eyes. This place that had been my refuge felt right to be in, but it also felt strangely empty. My phone buzzed and buzzed. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to face whatever storm was brewing. Over the next few weeks, my family launched what I can only call a full-scale pressure campaign. They started slow, strategic texts, voicemails, little reminders about how family sticks together. Funny coming from people who hadn't exactly stuck by me. My mom opened with the sad, confused parent routine. "We just want to understand what happened, Noah." Sure you do. The same people who couldn't be bothered to call when I had surgery last year were suddenly worried. It's amazing how money creates instant concern. My dad tried a different tack, Mr. Businessman appealing to legacy and family heritage. He called one night about how the Carter men always looked after each other, about keeping the family intact. Respect only flowed one way in our family, apparently. My mom texted daily, sometimes twice, switching between guilt trips and odd nostalgia. She even had the nerve to bring up how much they'd sacrificed for me over the years. "We gave you everything, Noah. Like basic food and shelter was some massive favor. Last I checked, that's the minimum requirement for having a kid." Then my dad changed strategy. He showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, all smiles and fake concern, and casually mentioned they were planning to help Zach with a down payment and that this inheritance would make it easier. When I didn't take the bait, his face hardened. "This isn't what Walter would have wanted," he said, voice cold. "He'd be disappointed in your selfishness." Rich, coming from a man who visited his own father maybe twice a year, and only when it suited him, Zach was the worst. He posted photos of himself with Grandpa on social media, acting devastated and tagging them with lines like, "Missing you every day, my favorite grandson." Pure performance. This is the same guy who complained about visiting Grandpa at Christmas because it cut into his party time. Privately, he texted me, "You know, I'm the one who should have that house." Don't be a jerk. Another, "You've always been jealous of me. This is pathetic, even for you." And my favorite, "You must have manipulated him somehow. No way he'd pick you over me if he was thinking straight." They didn't even try to hide their motivations. It was about control and money. How dare I have? Something they couldn't touch that they assumed belonged to Zach by default. My mom resorted to the crying, routine again, and called me sobbing about how they'd always tried their best, and she didn't understand why I was punishing them. When that failed, she started reaching out to mutual family friends, telling them I was mentally unstable and making poor choices. I got a call from my aunt asking if I was okay because my mom told her I was having a breakdown. Classic. If they can't control me directly, they'll try to undermine me to everyone else. The worst part? They barely cared about Grandpa when he was alive. 2 visits a year, tops. One was Christmas, where they'd stay exactly 2 hours and find some excuse to leave. The other was a passive-aggressive dinner where my mom complained about how much he'd been slipping. I don't remember a single time they did anything for him without an ulterior motive. After 3 weeks of guilt-tripping, gaslighting, and shameless begging, I did the one thing they never expected. I cut them off completely. Blocked their numbers, removed them from social media, changed the locks on Grandpa's house. No announcement, no grand exit, just silence. They went nuts, of course, but I was tired. Those first couple months living in Grandpa's house were peaceful, quiet. I fixed up the place slowly, working on it every weekend. No pressure, no one breathing down my neck. I got a promotion at work. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win anyone's approval. I was just living. But if there's one thing I learned about my family, it's that they don't give up when they're losing. They wait, they calculate. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out how far they were willing to go. Barely 3 months after I cut contact, they were back with a vengeance. I came home from a brutal 10-hour shift one evening, exhausted and just wanting to relax, and found 3 familiar faces on my front porch, my parents and Zach. I hadn't even made it up the steps before my mom started in, arms crossed and that dangerous smile. She called me sweetheart, like we were at a Sunday brunch. But there was a 4th person, new, a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a leather portfolio. Lawyer vibes. She said she was there to mediate a discussion regarding the estate. No one said contest out loud yet, but that was clearly where this was headed. Zach didn't bother pretending to be civil. He leaned against the railing like he already owned the place, barely glancing my way. He truly believed the inheritance was his. He'd been raised thinking the world owed him everything, and no one had ever corrected him. "You've been milking this long enough," he sneered. That same condescending tone. "You barely even saw Grandpa toward the end." My mom called it a misunderstanding and insisted Grandpa must have been confused when he made the will. My dad, as usual, stayed quiet until he thought his words would land. "Think about what your grandfather would have wanted," he said, as if the will hadn't been signed, notarized, and legally clear. I didn't engage. No argument, no back and forth. I told them there was nothing to discuss, walked inside, and shut the door. They lingered on the porch for a few minutes, Zach probably complaining about how ungrateful I was, then their tires crunched away. That night I didn't sleep much. Not from stress, oddly, but from clarity. It was never about fairness or grief. They couldn't stand that I had something they couldn't control. This was just the opening move. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. Certified mail, law firm letterhead. Polite but threatening. My parents and Zach were officially contesting the will. They alleged my grandfather had been under undue influence when he changed it, claiming I'd isolated him, played on his emotions, and turned him against the family. They wanted the inheritance split, or preferably handed entirely to Zach. I sat at the kitchen table and read their claims over and over. I called the lawyer who had handled the estate, Janet, someone Grandpa had trusted for years. She wasn't surprised. I was wondering when they'd make a move, she said. They didn't take it well. But the will is airtight. I drafted it myself. Signed, witnessed, documented. Nothing they'd filed had any real teeth. Can they still make this expensive? I asked. She didn't lie. Yes. They could drag it out. Waste my time. Drain my money. That's usually how this works. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to wear me down until I gave up something. It wasn't just a legal fight. It was psychological warfare, so I treated it like one. I started pulling records, old bank statements, health records, notes Grandpa had scribbled on envelopes and scraps. I checked every drawer, every folder, every locked cabinet in the house. I made copies of everything, scanned them, backed them up twice. While I was at it, I started digging deeper into my parents' finances. They'd always acted like they were better off than they were. New furniture every few years, weekend getaways, upgrades they couldn't really afford. But I didn't know the numbers until I connected the dots. Credit card balances, missed payments, refinanced loans, a second mortgage. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were drowning in debt. With Grandpa gone, their safety net had snapped. That's why they wanted the money. They were desperate, and they expected me to bail them out of the mess they'd made. Well, I didn't. Zach, of course, couldn't keep quiet. He went online and posted some vague garbage about being stabbed in the back and fake people who steal what doesn't belong to them. Classic Zach move. He screws up, plays the victim, and then waits for people to pat him on the back. Meanwhile, I kept digging. I went through every box, folder, and envelope my grandfather had left behind. His system was old school, everything on paper, but it was organized. In a drawer labeled private, I found records showing my parents had borrowed money from him for years. Not gifts, not help, actual loans with written amounts, dates, and not a single repayment. And then I found 5 separate entries tied directly to Zach. One for a used car, one marked education, and a few vague ones just labeled support, every single one signed. Grandpa kept every receipt. I scanned it all, backed it up, and sent everything to Janet, my lawyer. She pulled together a response, summaries of the loans, bank statements, documentation, and sent it over to their attorney. No arguments, no excuses. Just proof. The very next morning, their lawyer called mine with a settlement offer. They wanted 60% and called it a compromise. We rejected it flat. No counter. I ignored their messages. Kept my head down, focused on the case. They'd started a war, and I wasn't about to roll over just because they said I should. Then came the moment that hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was still in cleanup mode, sorting papers, scanning documents, boxing up old files in the back room of the house. My grandfather didn't throw much away. Most of it was boring. Bank slips, tax returns, appliance warranties from the early 2000s. But then I found a locked drawer at the bottom of his old office cabinet. The key was taped under the drawer itself, classic old man move. Inside was a single manila folder. No label. I pulled it out, sat at the desk, and opened it, expecting some old business paperwork. The first thing inside was a handwritten letter. No date, just my name at the top. My name. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and there's something you deserve to know. I froze. Beneath the letter was a DNA test. Real, official-looking lab paperwork. Sealed results. 2 names, his and mine. Paternal match. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it wasn't fake. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Or maybe even a prank, but no. The words were clear. Bold text, full match. 99.99%, he wasn't my grandfather. He was my father. I just sat there, staring at the paper, like maybe if I looked long enough, the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. My brain short-circuited. I wasn't even angry, just blank. The man I thought was my dad, cold, stiff, distant, wasn't actually my dad. And the one person in my family who always treated me like I mattered, he wasn't just being a kind grandparent to a neglected kid. He was being a father from the sidelines. But why? How? I went back to the letter. Walter explained that years ago, in his mid-60s, he got involved with a younger woman. She got pregnant. She didn't want to raise a kid alone, and he didn't want to destroy his name, his business, or his reputation by admitting to an affair at that stage in his life. So, he went to his son, my dad, and made a deal, Raise the kid. Keep it quiet. In return, you'll be taken care of later, they agreed. But according to the letter, it fell apart quickly. My mom never wanted me in the first place. My dad only stuck to the deal because he thought there'd be a payday. Zach, of course, was treated like royalty. I was just the cost of a bad trade. Walter admitted he stayed distant because he thought a real family, even a fake one, was better than raising me alone. Later, he realized that had been a mistake, but by then it was too late. He wrote that he watched how they treated me, how I was ignored, blamed, sidelined. He thought about stepping in more than once but never did, until the end. Everything I gave you in the will, he wrote. I gave it to my son, the only one in this family who didn't lie, steal, or expect something for nothing. That was the last line. I read the letter again and again, and suddenly, things that had never made sense started clicking into place. Why my parents were always cold, why they treated me like a burden, why Grandpa Walter was always there in quiet ways. He wasn't just helping out. He was looking out for his son. I thought back to 3rd grade when we had to do a family tree project. I worked on it for hours, drawing pictures, writing facts about each person. When I showed it to my parents, my dad barely looked at it. Just said, "You got your grandfather's birthday wrong." No praise. No interest. When I showed it to Grandpa, though, he studied every detail. Asked me questions. Told me I did a good job. He even hung it on his fridge for months. Or that time my mom snapped during an argument with my dad and said, "He's more your father's problem than yours anyway." I'd thought she meant I was just like Grandpa. Turns out she meant it literally. I was living proof of something they wanted to erase. And the inheritance? It wasn't favoritism. It wasn't about money. It was the only way Walter could finally acknowledge me as his son without wrecking his reputation. His last chance to set things right. I put the documents back in the folder, locked the drawer, and slid it shut. The case against me was still active. They were still trying to rip the house, the accounts, everything out of my hands, all while knowing I wasn't even their son. That changed everything. They had no idea what was coming. I copied the DNA test and the letter, kept the originals locked up safe. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Janet. I needed time to plan, to be patient. The hearing was 2 weeks away. I kept it quiet until the day before. In court, my parents were already there when I arrived. Mom wouldn't even look at me. Dad wore that same disgusted look I'd seen all my life. Zach looked offended, like he was the victim. Their lawyer opened with the same tired routine. The will was tampered with. I manipulated Walter. He wasn't of sound mind. Janet cut straight through. She brought out the certified will. The signatures. The video footage showing Walter sharp, clear, and deliberate when he made the changes. She showed the financial history, the unpaid loans, the dependency, the reduced support for my parents and Zach years before the new will. Then she dropped the envelope, the DNA test. She explained it calmly. The inheritance wasn't left to some random grandson. It went to Walter's son. My mom shifted in her seat. My dad stared straight ahead. Zach looked stunned. For once, he had to sit there and face the fact that I had more claim to the Carter name than he ever would. Their lawyer tried to dismiss it, said the DNA was irrelevant. The judge didn't buy it. He asked my parents directly if they knew about the paternity. My dad's face gave it away. He'd always known. The ruling was quick. Case closed. They walked out without a word. I stayed behind, signed some final documents, and left. They had tried everything. Guilt, manipulation, legal threats, reputation games. They still lost. Not just because the will was airtight, but because the truth they'd buried for decades finally surfaced. 4 months later, things were quiet. No texts, no emails, no calls. Zach had gone silent. I figured they'd finally decided to move on. Then one morning, they showed up. I was outside fixing the side fence when their car pulled into the driveway. Mom and Dad got out. No Zach. They looked awful. I waited. Mom did most of the talking. Bills, debt, no one left. Zach had bailed on them. Moved out. Blocked them everywhere. Left them drowning. Dad chimed in halfway, saying they were in a tough spot and thought maybe I could help. No apology. No reflection. Just another attempt to make me the savior now that their golden child was gone. I let them talk. Finally, I said, "So now I'm the backup plan." "That's not fair, Noah." Mom said, her voice cracking. We're still your parents. We raised you. No, I said. Walter raised me. You just housed me. Silence. 25 years of lies and indifference collapsed into that one moment. We have nowhere else to go, my dad finally said, his pride breaking. Zach took everything. We're your family. The only one you have. The man who had watched me grow up knowing I wasn't his son. The man who treated me like a burden my whole life. No, I told him. You're not my family. You never were. I reminded them of the choices they'd made, of how clear they'd been about who mattered. That was their team. Zach was their choice. And now that he was gone, it wasn't my job to clean up the mess. They stood there, lost for words. Dad just stared like he was waiting for me to cave. I didn't. I told them I had work to do and went back to the fence. They lingered a minute, then left. I haven't seen or heard from them since. That's how it ended. They came back, not out of love or regret, but because they were out of options, and I refused to be their fallback plan. Now it's just me, the house, and quiet. No more proving myself. No more bending for people who only show up when they need something. They picked their side a long time ago. And now, they can live with that choice. I'm good right where I am, and that's it. Reddit, thanks for reading. If you want to ask anything, drop a comment, I'll try to reply. Edit 1. For those asking, no, I haven't heard from them since that last doorstep moment. Zach's still MIA, and as far as I know, my parents are still drowning in the mess they made. Not my problem. Edit 2. Thanks to everyone who read this, left a comment, or DM'd me to say they went through something similar. Makes me feel better knowing I'm not the only one who crawled out of a toxic family dynamic with receipts and a working spine.